Hello everyone, and welcome to our 5th episode in our Linux series. Today, we'll be exploring user management via the terminal. Now, before we get started, I'd like to begin by addressing the idea of users as a concept with Linux. So, something you may not have known is that users can also be services in Linux, and they can have automated tasks that they run in the background. And we're going to be getting more into this later in the episode, but let me answer a common question that a lot of people have about users, such as why is user management important? Well, in Linux and other operating systems, user management is key for both securing resources and administering different kinds of services or servers. One common service that works directly with user management is LDAP, and there's also Active Directory. Both of these work on Linux or can work with Linux, and both of them require user management in some way. Now, at what level will we be learning user management in this episode? Well, user management is a very vast topic, and it can delve into security and other domains. And depending on the distribution you're using, you may find that the way you perform user management via the graphical user interface is different. Even in the command line, there will be some small differences. But today, in today's demonstration, I'll be showing you how to add users, remove users, manage user passwords. You could also sign in to different user accounts and edit what files are in their directory by default. So we're going to be going over a lot of interesting topics today. And this is going to require us to explore some of the directories within our file system that also will show us some essential information for user accounts. Now, first, I just want to jump into this. Let's get started with how to add a user. Now, there are two ways to do this, useradd and adduser. These are both commands. So what's the difference between these two? Well, useradd enables a granular level of control for adding users, and this is controlled through parameters. So you could do -d to specify their home directory or the value for their home directory. Then you could use, for example, -e to set the expiration date on that account, etc. Let's go ahead and explore this command through the manual. So let me get into my terminal here. Do man user add. Alright, and as we can see, it mentions that what its purpose is to create new users. It even mentions add user here, which we're about to go over in just a moment. You could scroll down and it goes over like plenty of information, it talks about, here's the one that I mentioned, -d. This specifies where the home directory should be for that user. Now, this is a value in the system, and it doesn't necessarily create that directory by default. It's just referencing where that user's home directory would be. And here's -e, which we mentioned, but we're not going to be using that. And if for people already familiar, you could use some of these other ones. Like you could set the group ID, you could assign them to groups. Let's go ahead and scroll down. This is what we're using. We're going to be using -m. So we're going to be using -d and -m. So we use the -d parameter in order to specify the value of where their directory should be. And then if you use -m, it ensures the creation of that directory. So let's go ahead and jump right into creating our first user. So to use useradd, you may need sudo permissions enabled. And in order to use this command effectively, you're going to want to add the parameters that we mentioned before. So you could do something like this. You could do sudo useradd test user1, and I'm using 1 here because we're going to be creating at least 2 users today. And this is all nice and all. It will add a user, but it won't create a home directory for them. And this is where the -d parameter, it enables us to specify where their home directory should be. And then -m ensures that that directory is created, because if you use the -d parameter, like I said, that's a value. It's a reference value for where their home directory is. And -m or -m ensures the creation of the directory specified. So that's why we use those together here. Now let's go ahead and run this command. It looks like I got 2 spaces there. You want to make sure you type this out correctly. Now we're going to hit enter. And it didn't ask me for my sudo password because I've already been messing around on my machine. So I've recently entered the password, and it doesn't always prompt you each time you need to use it. Now, before we continue, since we ran this command, let's check to see if this directory now exists. Since we created it and we're in the home directory, let's do ls. And as you can see, it says test user -1. And that directory was not there before we had done that command. And as you can see, there's only one user right now. If you're still a little skeptical, I'm going to be adding another user, so you'll definitely be able to see how we're adding users to this directory. Now, something I like to go over is changing a password with that user. So if, for example, if this account was for someone else to sign into, you know, if you wanted to explicitly give them a password to sign in with, you could use the password command, which is typed out like this. Now let's go ahead and use the manual on this command to learn about it. And as it says, change user password. So you could change your own password, you could change other users' passwords, and it just talks about some information and other things. And you also could lock an account. So if you wanted to deactivate an account so people couldn't sign in, you could simply use the lock parameter to lock the account. Now, we're not going to be going too much into this command today. I just want to show you that that's an option if you're wanting to change the user password. Now, let's create another directory by adding another user through useradd. But before we do that, I actually want to show you something. So we're going to sign in to the sudo or the root account, which will give us access to sudo permissions by default. Now, why am I doing this? Because the command I'm going to be showing you also enables you to sign in to other user accounts. And in particular, you need sudo permission or the sudo privileges in order to access information about other user accounts. Let me show you what I mean. So if we try to change directory into test user 1 right now, the permission's denied. Well, alright, let's do sudo change directory, and we'll change directory into the test user -1 profile. And as you can see, you could specify some parameters here to run a privilege shell or etc. But since we're on an episode about user management, I want to show you how you could sign in to user accounts. And that's with the su command. So we're going to be doing a manual on it, and that's how it's typed out, su. And it allows commands to be run with a substitute user or group ID. And in particular, we can substitute our account. We could become the root account and start running some commands. And this could also be done, let me show you. You could do and you might want to run sudo here regardless of what account you're signing into. You could do something like sudo su test user -1. And if you entered here, you would sign into that user account, and the name here would change to test user 1. But we're not going to do that. I want to sign into the sudo account, or the administrator account, the root account. And I'm doing this so I can show you exactly how to get into whichever directories you're trying to get into. So to do that, we're just going to be using the hyphen. The hyphen signifies the root account in this aspect. So let's go ahead and enter. And since I don't need the sudo password, since I've been using sudo commands, it signed me right into the root account. And you can tell because look at this, it changed. Now something to note is that the home directory changes here. Let's go ahead and change back to the root directory because the home directory for the root account doesn't have a lot of special information for us for this episode to look at. So we're going to be doing ls, and we're going to be wanting to change into the home directory. ls, and we can see test user. So now let's change into the test user directory. And here we are. We could see what the contents of their directory are. So this lets us evaluate their account and see, what programs are installed, what files are installed, and there should be nothing by default. Let's do ls. You can see there's nothing there, but there are some hidden files which are by default given to user accounts when they're created. And in order to check that, we're going to need to run the a parameter. And just to make it look good in a list so it's formatted, let's add the l parameter. So right now we're seeing all files, even hidden files, with the a, And then with L, we're formatting it into a list so it's more readable. Let's hit enter. And if you look, there actually are some files here. And these are the files that are created by default in this account. So let's go ahead and change our directory back to the root directory, and we're going to clear. Now, if we want to add files to the accounts that are being created by default, we're going to want to go to a particular directory. And in this case, it's going to be in the etc folder, or etc. So let's go ahead and change into that and do ls. Now a lot of stuff comes up here. What are we looking for? Let me clear this. You're looking for the skel directory, which refers to the skeleton of accounts, or like before the accounts are formed, like, you know, the skel directory basically has the contents of what goes into those directories. So before we change into that directory, let's go ahead and list it. We'll do la again to get the information of the directory, and we'll do skel. And look, these are the exact same files that we were able to view in the other account. Now I'm going to show you, we're just going to create a simple file. Let's change into the directory. We'll clear. And let's use nano just real quick, create a test file. We'll just say this is a test file. And I've gone over nano in previous episodes, so I'm not going to specify too much information here. Could do this through a graphical user interface if you wanted. But we're going to hit exit, and we're going to save. And we're going to name this test file. And we're going to hit enter. Now let's do ls to make sure this file's been created. And if you look, there it is. We could do ls minus la to see all the files again. It's right there. So let's hit clear. Let's change back into the home directory. Now if I wanted to sign back into the user I just was, we could do sudo su and then tnider in my case, because that's the account that I was signed into. And notice right here, once again, this changes. And then the color changes too. That really just depends on the terminal you're using. But okay, you know, we changed the contents of that directory, and we're in our home directory, right? Let's do ls. Now let's change directory into tnider, and let's do ls. Now, you may notice, actually, you know what, this isn't the best example. Let me go ahead and sign back into the admin account. We're going to use the test user account. I'm just trying to show you here. Let's change into the home directory, clear. Now let's do ls test user -1, and we're going to add the same parameters we added earlier so we could see all the contents in their directory. Notice nothing has been added here. That's because only new accounts that are created after you edit that skeleton directory, because like I said, that's the directory. Like once you add files to that directory, they're updated once you add new accounts. So if we add a new user, they're going to have the test file. And let me demonstrate that here. So, you know, we'll need to stay in root in order to check the new user's information. So we're going to stay in root here. Now let's use add user. But before we do, we're going to use the manual command so we can learn a little bit about it. Now, essentially, there's a difference between useradd and add user. Now, add user is not in each distribution by default. You could install it, but it's actually a shell script that is created by Perl, the scripting language, if you're familiar with that. And if you're interested, you know, you could scroll through here and check, you know, various information. Basically, it's lets you input information in an interactive prompt. Let's go ahead and quit. And I'm going to actually show you real quick where you could check it out if you wanted, you know. You could do, it's in the user at binary bins. Let's go ahead and do that. So these are like commands that you could enter, you know, like we got shut down, like you could enter that command. In particular, we're interested in the add user command. So let's go ahead and type that. Oh, I meant to use grep there. Grep add user. So here we're grabbing the output of the S bin and getting add user. We can see it's there. So let's go ahead and nano into the S bin add user. And if you look, it says, it specifies that it's a Perl script, that it executes from Perl as a shell, and it's, you know, created by show some information. You know, they got some information here about it. You can scroll down. So this script actually uses the useradd command and enables a way for you to create an account that useradd is ran in the background with this script, and it enables you to have a little bit of interactivity. Now let's just go ahead and exit. I'm just trying to show you guys, you know, if you wanted to look at these commands or check out, you know, more information about these commands, this is a way to do it. Now let's go ahead and clear. And we're still in the home directory here, you know. Let's use adduser now. And in this case, we're going to name the user test user2. And look, it gives us some information. Now this is different than useradd. Useradd, you know, you specify parameters and it doesn't really give much output, but look at this. It says adding user. It gives us information about how it selects the user ID. We're going to be going over user IDs here soon, so don't worry if this doesn't make much sense with the user ID, the group ID. But look, it says it creates the home directory. It does this by default for us. And you could even see here it says copying files from the skeleton directory. And that's how you can tell this directory is used to get the default files for a new user account. It says enter password. You know, we're just gonna enter whatever password here. Oh, it is based on a dictionary word. You know what? Oh, it says, oh, it's just letting us know that it's a bad password. So just know that it may give you different prompts here. Let's see. It says new password. So it specifies retype new password and new password. Let's go back to typing the password here. Notice it says bad password. That's because it's not a password that has good security. Because I'm typing something simple here. But once I retype the password, it says, and notice this passwd password. You know, password updated successfully. I give some information. Now this is where it's more interactive than the other user command. You know, the other command, we didn't really specify a lot of the default values for that account, but in this one they're asking us, they're prompting us. So we could do test user2 room number. You know, some of these don't apply to us. If you don't want to fill them out, you can just hit enter. Other, you know, we'll ignore that. Is this information correct? Yes. And then look, it adds it. Now let's go ahead and clear, and we'll do ls. And there's test user2. Now let's go ahead, we're gonna go into that directory now. Let's change directories into the user2 directory. And let's do ls, and we'll list all the files. Look at that, here's our test file. And we could even concatenate it with the cat command to learn the contents of the file. And look, this is a test file. That is the file that we created earlier. So I'm right here just reinforcing your knowledge of we can create this file, and this file will, you know, this doesn't have to be just a file. It could be a program, you know, it could even be, you know, a mounted file for, you know, something over the network that you could give by default to new users. And you can even specify it based on group ID, you know, like if this user's in this group, they'll have these files by default. And there's all sorts of things you can do with these scripts and commands that you could even write your own. So a lot of useful and interesting information here that you can go over. Let's go ahead and clear. And we're actually going to change back into the home directory, and we're going to sign out of the sudo account, because I would not recommend staying in the sudo account or having full sudo permissions. As I mentioned, like mistyping a command could remove all the files on your file system, and that's just one of the consequences so of what could happen. So we're going to go ahead and sign back into tnider. You can see that the name has changed, so we know we're the tnider. And like I mentioned, you know, you could do all sorts of things with these user accounts over the network, you know, when you're updating their information. And I'm actually going to show here how to remove these users. But before we do, let's go ahead and check the files that I was talking about in the directories that give you some valuable information about the users on your account. So here we're going to change into etc directory again. We'll do ls. Notice there's still a lot of content here, so, but in particular we're looking for, we'll do clear. We want to grab do la, we're going to grep, so we're going to grab the password file. Now what is the password file? And you can see this is the one we're interested in. Now what is the password file? Well, essentially, the password file is a special file that stores general user info. Passwords are not stored in this file, but if we check this file, we can see information such as the user ID, the username, the group ID, the home directory, and their login shell. Now let's go ahead and check it out. We'll do cat password. And if you're in another directory, like let's say we're in the home directory, you do cat etc password. And look, now there's a bunch of results here. And this is kind of what I was saying earlier, but I want you to only pay attention to these bottom three right now. These are the three users on our account. There's my user, there's test user 1, test user 2, and you can see some valuable information such as, the user ID, the group ID, and you could see them for these two. And then you could see the name. In this case, we didn't actually specify a name for the account. Like I mentioned, when we used adduser, they asked, what's the full name for this account? Well, we'd put in test user 2. In here, that's missing. But if you look in this account, it does have my name because I made this through the graphical user interface, so it automated some of that for us. And if you look, it specifies the home directory, which we specified. And here it also does that. But notice there's a difference here. These two accounts are using the bash shell, and this is not. And that's because we didn't specify what shell we wanted to use when we created this account, which is kind of what I'm getting at here with useradd. You need to specify a lot more things, like what shell are they having. You need to, enforce the creation of the directory with -m after you specify it with -d. So adduser is more convenient and more easy, but useradd, gives you more control over the parameters, and you could do more with it, but it's more complicated. Now, this is how we can check what users are on our machine. If you notice, there's a bunch of other results. Now, this actually, something I mentioned before in this episode is that users are actually services as well in some cases. And typically, these users are the services, and they're assigned permissions, and they're given automated tasks that they run periodically. And this is how they work as a service, because if you could have a background user or service that backs up files over the network at periodic times, and they do it in a particular directory. And that sort of thing is how you would ensure that this would just be an effective way to create a user that's a service, and they could do all sorts of things in the background for you. And that's what these are kind of showing here. Is this is the user file about user information, but you see other things, like we see the system D and the syslog, and some other things going on here, which we're going to be going over in later episodes. So let's go ahead and clear. And now there's one more file I'd like to show you. This is actually going to be let's see. So in order to access this file, we're actually going to need some administrative privileges. So let's go ahead. We're going to be changing directory into etc again. And then we're going to be grabbing shadow. Oh, I actually messed that up. We still need to do the do Control C if you mess that up like me. I don't know what I'm doing today, but let's we're gonna do ls the contents, and then we're gonna grep shadow. Look, that we have some output here, but we're interested in this file right here. Now, this file contains sensitive password related information, and this password in the file is encrypted, and it also contains the more information about that password. Now, I'm not going to get into it, it's a little technical here, but it contains things such as information about the password, the hash, the salt that's used with that hash, if you're familiar with that. It talks about like the password expiration date, the minimum and maximum time between password changes. Let's go ahead and check it out. So we're going to use, but you're going to need sudo permission in order to check this file out. So let's do sudo cat shadow. And we're going to enter the password here. And look, we can see some information here. So for example, on my local machine, I think that, as I'm aware, this is the salt. and then this is the hash, and then this should be the expiration. Let me see. I'm not really entirely sure what each section means, but just know that one of these is the expiration date on your password. One is, the minimum and maximum time between password changes. And yes, this is the salt, and then this would be the hash here. And these are used to secure your password, so if someone does somehow get sudo permission, they still need to be able to figure out your password from the salt and hash, which depending on their skill set may be easier for one person compared to the next. But as I mentioned, I would like to go over one more thing. And we're going to go back to the password file in order so I could show you, or the passwd. I just call it password to make it easier to say, but we're going to be checking that out after we remove these users so that you can see the changes. And we're going to be using two different things here. So we're going to be using the user delete command. And let's use the manual on that so we can learn a little more about it. It says delete a user account and related files. So you could go ahead and go over the parameters, but I'm not going to go crazy here. I'm going to actually show you exactly what it does. So let's use ls. Now, simple as this, you may need sudo permission, but let's use user delete on test user 1. Alright, so have we removed the user? Well, actually, user delete deletes the user, but it doesn't delete their information by default. Let me show you what I mean here. If we use ls, the test user folder, the home directory, is still there. Now, if we concatenate the contents of the password file, if you notice, test user 1 is not here. They're missing, and this is a lot of content, so we also could just do let me go ahead and do this, and then we're gonna grab, you could try to grab test user 1 here just to see for certain, is it really gone? I'm typing it wrong here. There's no output because test user 1 has been deleted, but the contents of their home directory is still there. So this is useful if you want to delete a user and maybe it's going to be a returning user, or you need to store that user's information for separate purposes. If you could send this file to an archive over a network, or have an archive on your local machine where maybe you could compress the information in a file. It goes on and on, but essentially what I'm saying here is that this directory contains information about that user, and in particular, this is how you could save data relating to that user. Now, if you did not want to do this, you could do sudo rm, and this is where you want to be careful here. If you type just the /, it's your root directory. Be very careful not to make a typo here. But we're deleting the test user 1's home directory and all the directories in there. Now let's do ls, and it's gone. But what if we wanted to remove the home directory by default? Well, you can do that with actually user delete. We'll do sudo user delete, then -r, just like remove, and -r just ensures that all the files from that directory are removed, including that home directory. So let's go ahead and use -r, and this time we're going to be removing the test user 2. Let's go ahead and do that, and notice that it has some output. Now typically users have this account sometimes when they're created. So if it didn't have a home directory and you deleted the user this way, it would probably also say user delete test user 2, and then it would say something about the home directory here, and it would say home directory not found, just like this. It would be similar output. Let's go ahead and do ls here, and notice it's missing. And if we do, let me see if I can get it. Here we go. So we're getting the information from the passwd file, and we're trying to get the test user 2 info. Let's hit enter. Notice we get nothing. Now if we remove this, hit enter, notice it's just my account. So essentially, let me summarize what we've gone over today. Let me clear this. So we've gone over how to add users, remove users, also change the default files, with test file. We had test file that was created, so when test user 2 was created, by default it added that file. So editing users, signing in as new users with the su command. A lot of these you need administrative privileges to do. Also, maybe if you remove an account, how you might want to remove it with the -r parameter, or maybe without that, so you can then save the information from that user. So there are a lot of things to consider here. And like I said, user management is an advanced and very in-depth topic, and we're just scratching the surface here. And I'm excited to have gone over this with you guys today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. But as I mentioned, we're going to be going over other things in the future, such as accessing permissions and managing groups, you know, different things like that. Maybe setting password expiration times and all that good stuff. So, and it basically depends on that sort of stuff would depend on the organization you're working for, your own personal preferences. But I'm excited to see you guys in the next episode, and I hope this was very informative to you. If you like this video, go ahead and hit a like, subscribe, and I'm looking forward to creating more content, and I'll see you guys, so stay tuned.